Saddam's poison gas weapons. They'll all be killed by his anthrax. That was the regular argument made, and people are not entitled to forget this. Anyway, I'm not going to let them. The regular argument made by the peaceniks of the Congress was, it's too dangerous. He's too heavily armed to do it. Now, let's all come clean about this, then. Don't you think? You don't want to come clean. You don't want to come clean.
Scott a chance.
Well, I'm going to keep on giving you the chance to come clean.
You'll get your shot. You'll get. I promise you, you'll get your chance. But right now, I want these two fellas to talk, and then, but save it, because we're not going home that early. So don't worry about it, Scott. I'm sure that you have some response to what Christopher's just said about the potential capacity, anyway, of Hussein to wreak damage not only on his neighbors but maybe elsewhere.
Well, it's interesting to hear Mr. Hitchens talk about the Ministry of Concealment, the terminology he used. The last title that I held with the United Nations was Chief of the Counter-Concealment Investigations Team. So I think I stand before you as one of the most qualified people to talk about the issue of Iraqi concealment. And I will say this, that in 1998, on the eve of my resignation, I shared your concern that Iraq might be hiding some aspects of its weapons of mass destruction. We, as inspectors, were unable to certify 100% compliance on the part of Iraq. We were concerned about certain aspects of their chemical weapons program, in particular those dealing with VX nerve agent. We were concerned about certain aspects of their biological weapons program, especially those dealing with the potential of Iraq to have weaponized anthrax in dry powdered form. We were concerned about certain aspects of their nuclear weapons program, especially dealing with the high explosive spherical devices that could be used as an implosion device for a nuclear weapon, not fissile material, but components of a weapon. We had no evidence that these existed. Far from it. We had the inability to confirm their final disposition. And because Iraq had lied to us, because Iraq had, early on in the process of our efforts in Iraq, actively concealed WMD material from us, we were in no position to accept at face value Iraq's contention that all weapons of mass destruction had been destroyed in the summer of 1991. So I will say that there was reason to doubt Iraq's contention that it had been completely disarmed of weapons of mass destruction. However, it's important to note a couple things. There's a lot of mythology that's come out. Mr. Hitchens mentions two of them. The mythology of the centrifuges underneath the rose bush in Mahdi Obeidi's front yard. You know, Mahdi Obeidi tells a heck of a story. It's one that he didn't tell us when we interviewed him in Iraq over a period of time when he had plenty of opportunity to come clean.
Oh, and his family was in the hands of Saddam's police.
Right, yeah. Yeah, he was in the hands of Saddam's police.
Come on.
We also had information that Mahdi Obeidi had hidden this material under his rose bush, and we were actively moving on this when the plug got pulled on us in December 1998, not by Saddam Hussein, by the way, but by Bill Clinton and the Clinton administration, who had no intention of allowing weapons inspectors to fulfill their mandate of disarmament, because the policy of the United States, ladies and gentlemen, was never about disarmament. It was about regime change from day one, 1991. Disarmament was an excuse, something that created the opportunity to facilitate regime change. But the more the inspectors pressed towards coming to a conclusion about Iraq's WMD, the more we threatened U.S. policy objectives of regime change. Mahdi Obeidi, think about this, what he says, that he hid centrifuge components under his rose bush, under Qusay Hussein's instructions. Furthermore, he said that he went to Qusay's office and received these components from Qusay, specifically selected for the technological ability to reconstitute the program. Ladies and gentlemen, Qusay Saddam Hussein knows nothing about a centrifuge program. How could he select the critical components? There's only one person in Iraq who could select the critical components, and that was Mahdi Obeidi, who did so when ordered by the Iraqi government to destroy this material in 1991. He said, "I will not part with my life's work," and he buried this material under his rose garden in violation of an order from the Iraqi government. We now know this to be the case. No, he didn't hold this for a continuation of a nuclear program. There was one man's vain hubris that held on to this. This is not evidence of a reconstituted weapons program. The guys who went to Syria to sell missiles, I happen to know them very well. Dr. Moder Al-Tamimi. Gentleman is a fraud from day one. He has a record of going around speaking out of school, trying to build the Grand Missile, whose programs are never agreed to by the Iraqi government. This is a man who was involved in various fraudulent procurement activities from day one. This was not evidence of an Iraqi effort to procure material. And if the U.S. government wants to make the claim that it is, then the U.S. government should put these very documents before the American people so that we can evaluate them for ourselves. I will not accept at face value this notion that Iraq has somehow intended to procure weapons. No, ladies and gentlemen, what we know is this case. The CIA today has confirmed that Iraq destroyed the totality of its WMD programs in the summer of 1991. Far from being non-compliant, Iraq was in fact in full compliance with its obligation to disarm. It's that the United States was not willing to accept this finding, even when weapons inspectors started putting forward documentation that suggested this might be the case.
This appears to be what we have to call a heuristic question, depending on actual verifiable information. Before I reply, I just have to ask you, do you say the CIA says Iraq was in full compliance in 91? I thought you earlier were saying 99.
No, I'm saying today the CIA, with the benefit of the accumulation of knowledge that they've acquired post-invasion,
yes,
has put forward in the Iraq Survey Group's findings that Iraq destroyed the totality of its WMD in the summer of 1991.
91?
Yes, sir.
So the Kamel brothers were lying when they defected to Jordan and said that they were helping to conceal a further weapons program?
I think the Kamel brothers, when they spoke of concealment, spoke of activities that took place in the summer of 1991, so they were telling the truth. They were also telling the truth when they said that everything had been destroyed, because that is repeated over and over again in the testimony provided by Hussein Kamal, not only to the CIA, but to British MI6 and to the United Nations inspectors themselves, that all weapons had been destroyed on their orders in the summer of 1991.
You see, because Dr. Abedi's book, well, I don't know why you sneer so much about the rosebush element of it, but if anyone cares to read this book, it is called The Bomb in My Garden, which I must say is a slightly kitsch title by Dr. Abedi. But I do commend it to your attention. It's another strangely neglected book. It does, as well as describe what life is like for a nuclear physicist under Saddam Hussein, describes what life is like under fascism. And it also describes the courses he had to take in how to lie to inspectors, and how to create dummy facilities for them to inspect, and how his family was held hostage when he was within eavesdropping distance of any inspector. And it does say what the nuclear centrifuge is, the crown jewels of nuclear physics, the hardest thing to acquire. And of course, Qusay Hussein wouldn't know one end of a centrifuge from another, nor would I. That's why it was Dr. Abedi to whom the components were given. The material discovered, and by the way, Dr. Abedi, when the arrival of American forces had occurred, went straight to David Albright, I believe I'm right in saying, and led them to the spot, which he hadn't been able to do, or had no possibility of doing before then. This was not in order, therefore, for it to form part of his private collection. You may well be right that your friend is a fraud, the man who went to the meeting in Damascus. But the record of the meeting with the North Koreans does exist. We know partly about it because the North Koreans were given a deposit before the meeting began, quite a large one. And when the coalition arrived on the borders of Iraq, they broke off the negotiations to sell the long-range missiles, went back to Pyongyang, taking the deposit with them instead of returning it, which led to a row within the party. We have the whole CD of that, of those conversations. But the most important concession, I think, that Scott Ritter has just made is that now we know, as he says, with all the information we've acquired since the invasion, we are enormously better informed about what Iraq was and was not doing. Absent an invasion, absent a removal of the regime, we would be taking the regime's word for it. No responsible president of the United States could possibly report back to his Congress and his electorate that that was what he was doing. That would be an impeachable stupidity. We can now certify Iraq as disarmed. Good. Plus, positive. A direct result of regime change, which is the only way inspection can be done. Mr. Ritter would never have set foot in Iraq if it hadn't been for the victory in Desert Storm.
I have a question for you.
By all means.